Hey folks, David Stewart here. Hope you guys are having a great day. I know I am. I'd like to talk a little bit about this doohickey that my brother-in-law told me about. This is the Steam Deck. This is a gaming PC in the form factor of a Nintendo Switch put out by Valve, the owner of Steam, the world's biggest PC game distribution platform. And it only starts at about $400. So let me go into what this is trying to do and talk a little bit about consoles, because Valve has tried to enter the console space and the hardware space a couple of times over the last decade. They've made several sorties into this area. The first one that I remember was the Steambox initiative. This was actually not Valve making the hardware. This was hardware made by third parties that then got this Steambox certification, kind of like what 3DO did with Panasonic back in the 90s, or Sega did with all the variations of the Saturn back in the 1990s. Nothing new, but it didn't really take off. It turns out that people who were really already invested in the Steam platform weren't really super interested in buying an expensive Steam box to plug into their TV when they could, buy a console or something like that. And people that were already invested in the console space didn't see a reason to jump on the Steam box. That mostly fell away. That was replaced by the Steam Link. That was their next little attempt to enter into the living room space where consoles are usually dominant. The Steam Link is a really cool piece of hardware. In some ways, a little bit ahead of its time. You could stream PC games from your gaming PC into your living room. So if you wanted to enjoy your games in your living room, that was an option. My brother-in-law actually has one of those in it, and it seemed to work pretty well, but I didn't have one. That kind of lives on as the Steam Link app, which you can use on your phone to stream games from your PC to your phone, and I've used that recently to try to stream like Final Fantasy XIV, and it worked pretty well. I don't usually use that because if I'm going to play a PC game, I'm usually able to just come into my office and do that. But it's a cool option for remote play. Handhelds are something that I really love because handhelds really fit well into my life. You guys know that I'm a big fan of the PlayStation Vita here. This guy has been my little friend, one of my best pieces of hardware that I've ever owned, and it's only gotten better over the last year as I've opened up all the possibilities by hacking it and installing my PS1 software library on it and things like that. It's just an amazing little thing, and it failed partly because Sony didn't support it, but also because of the timing. The timing was the boom of smartphones. People were buying into smartphones and were assuming that they could do most of their gaming on their smartphone, and Sony thought they wouldn't end up choosing that. They didn't end up supporting the Vita the way they probably should, and people chose their phone instead of things like the Vita or the 3DS. And we had kind of a death of really good handheld gaming for a while, but the Nintendo Switch has brought it back in an explosive fashion, and you can see that this piece of hardware is definitely intended to look and feel like a Nintendo Switch. It has that premium look, probably going to have a premium feel to it, maybe full-size buttons, no Joy-Cons, so it may even feel better than the Nintendo Switch. I had a lot of little complaints about my Nintendo Switch with the Joy-Cons, the drift on the sticks, but also the small buttons. Like the Vita has small buttons, but it's a very small device. It's not a big device. So this is a bigger one like the Nintendo Switch. It ought to have big buttons, in my opinion. So I really love the Vita, and it's great to see handheld gaming come back. Handheld gaming fits a lot better into my life. One of the reasons that the Wii U got a lot more playtime than my other consoles is, like after my son was born, my wife might want to watch a show while the baby's like sleeping on her. I might want to hang out with her. I don't really care about TV shows. So I could play Breath of the Wild on my Wii U. This is right when the Switch came out and it was hard to get one. And so the Switch has let a lot of people enjoy handheld gaming again. It's definitely a great console for what it is, but it's a little bit anemic. So in this case, you have the opportunity to get something like this at a pretty reasonable price point compared to the Nintendo Switch. It starts at only $400. And this to me is the most interesting thing about this sortie into the hardware market, is that it's very aggressively priced for what you're getting. This is a gaming PC. People have done the gaming PC in the Nintendo Switch form factor before. I'm sure you can find YouTube videos on it, but they're often very expensive. They're the price of a gaming PC, if not a little bit more, because of the difficulty of scaling and things like that. By having this really aggressive pricing structure, basically Valve is throwing its dice into. We're going to make this at a high volume, and we're looking to get people on our platform. The reality about console sales is that your company is usually going to be losing money, at least initially, on your console sales, meaning you're going to be selling them at or below cost in order to get them into the homes of people where they're going to buy games on the platform. And then when they buy the games, you get the fee, the licensing fee off the games, or you get the licensing fee if they buy it off your digital storefront. So you're making all the money on the back end. So in the past, this hadn't really been the case for hardware. Like the Steam boxes were overpriced, compared to a console, because you were having to pay the full price of the hardware, and they weren't going to be manufactured in such a large volume that you got any kind of savings on it like you would get by buying a PlayStation or a Nintendo. In this case, this aggressive pricing basically says, we're looking to get people to buy this who maybe haven't bought any Steam games or haven't bought many of them, and when they have this in their hands, then they're going to go to the store and buy games from us, and that's how we're going to make our money. We're going to expand our already gigantic storefront, our already huge distribution network. We're going to get this into the living room. It also has a dock, by the way. So this is just like the Nintendo Switch. The Nintendo Switch has a USB out that my phone actually has this. So the USB-C out can contain audio, video, USB, additional USB ports. Even Ethernet can be supported with that. And I have docks that will plug into my phone that will do all this stuff. And they also do the same thing with the Nintendo Switch. If it has enough power, I can hook it up to any kind of monitor with just a little dock you can buy for $15 off of Amazon. So in this case, you can buy an official Steam Link dock, or you could probably just use one of the ones on Amazon, or one of the ones you already have, or maybe even the Nintendo Switch dock, because it uses USB-C in order to do this. So you plug it into the dock or to the USB port on the top, and boom, it'll be able to hook up to your TV. So you're going to get the full advantages of the Switch, at least in those terms, of being able to play it on your PC, being able to play it on your TV, and being able to play it in a handheld mode. I think the handheld mode is really the bigger sell here. But by selling it as a handheld that also does the TV, you're getting to the space that Valve really wants to be in, which is in the living room. They want that convenient, casual consumer who likes to sit on the couch, turn on their TV, and buy content and things like that for their PlayStation, or buy movies, or stream things. That's what they're really targeting here. Now, here's the thing that they may not be realizing, and they maybe realize this but are trying to overcome it, is PCs are not consoles, not just because of the lockdown nature of their ecosystem, but because of the way that consumers know how console generations work. So when you buy into a piece of console hardware, like my PlayStation Vita here, my beloved PlayStation Vita, you are buying into a promise from the hardware manufacturer that they are going to support that hardware for a certain number of years, and that all the software you buy, which is for that hardware, will run on that hardware. So when you bought a PlayStation 4 back in 2014, or whenever you bought one, you knew that for 4 or 5 years, that was going to be the hardware, and all the games that you bought would run on that hardware. And despite that mid-generation PlayStation 4 Pro, there were no games that I know of that Sony allowed to be on the platform which only ran on the Pro. Like, there were games that were enhanced for the Pro, they ran better on the Pro, they made better use of the Pro, but all of them would run on the original base model as well. So that's really the promise that a console maker is making. Is like, we are going to replace this console eventually, because that's the way these generations work. But we're not going to replace it for a couple years, and all the games you buy for it are going to run on it. This is so different from PC gaming, though. This is one of the reasons that a lot of people don't like PC gaming. And if you're a PC gamer, you got to realize this, that people don't want to turn on their PC and have to figure out a bunch of settings for a game for it to run well. They don't want to have to make a bunch of choices about how the graphics are going to work. They don't want to have to deal with downloading and updating graphics drivers and downloading and updating OS updates, which may break other things. They just don't want to deal with that. Now, Steam has made PC gaming a whole heck of a lot easier and more convenient in that case, but you're still dealing with a PC. So in this case, what they're trying to do is make it more like a console. It's going to be a managed PC experience, would be my expectation. You can expect firmware and software updates from Valve, but what you're not going to get is a high degree of certification of all the software that'll run on it. It's a big, wide open platform, which means lots of things are going to run on it. Lots of things are going to run well. I expect most indie games to run really good at this. We'll take a look at the hardware specs in just a second, or you can look at it yourself at steamdeck.com in as much detail as you want. But some newer games obviously are not going to run well, and you're going to have to do some fiddling to get them to run well. Or Valve might provide like a profile for it that automatically sets up your settings. I hope that they think about doing something like that to make it a more convenient console experience for people. But you can't really expect that everything's going to run as well as it runs on, say, a dedicated piece of console hardware. Because the console hardware is the same for a number of years, developers can really optimize what they do for the platform. They can make all of those decisions. They can make games run better on older hardware because of optimizations that they can use, which you can't always use on the PC. And you can design your game with the hardware capabilities of the console in mind. Whereas with PC, you're not really sure what the end user is going to have. You may have minimum system requirement specs that you have to put out there, but you're not really sure what's going to run well. And you can look on the forums, and the Steam forums are full of people trying to get their games to run on their PC and having problems. Oh, this is only running at 20 frames per second. What's the deal? It's crashing on startup. All of those things come inherent with the PC space. And I don't know if the Steam Deck is going to solve those. In fact, I expect that it's not really going to solve those. For PC gamers like me who want a more Nintendo Switch-like experience to play a variety of PC games that they've already bought for cheap or they would like to buy for cheap. And this is a big advantage of it too. If I look at this as a new console and I buy it, I already have hundreds of games on Steam that I can play on it. It comes with like a giant library of games already ready to go, which is a big advantage. So if you're not already a PC gamer, is this going to convert you into one? Or are you going to look at it and be like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to deal with all the PC game kind of crap that other people have to deal with? Like, oh, this game's not running well, I have to download a patch. Those sorts of things are going to be concerns with this kind of hardware. And is Valve going to release slightly better hardware next year? Maybe this is a hit, and then they release the Steam Deck 2.0, and it's just better front to back. Well, now they have to manage that set of hardware with updates and things like that, and you're not sure if the games are going to run on the old one now. Like, oh, are the games they're coming out with a new game, is it going to run on my old Steam Deck? Whereas if you bought a PlayStation Vita for the entire life of the PlayStation Vita, you could be assured that PlayStation Vita games were going to run on it. If you bought a PlayStation 4, you could be ensured that all the PlayStation 4 games are going to run on it until you came out with Cyberpunk 77, which got pulled off the store, if I remember right, because it didn't run well. So Sony actually, in most cases, does a job certifying their games for their platform, making sure that they do indeed run on the PlayStation and will have a good gaming experience for people. And there's exceptions to that, but for the most part, that's what consumers want. They want to be able to turn it on and play a game and not have to worry about fiddling. I expect this won't solve that problem entirely. Here's another weird thing about this. You got to pay $5 to reserve your copy. So you have to pre-order. I actually think this is a good system because it'll cut out a lot of bots. You can only pre-order with a Valve, a Valve account that is older than June, I think. So you can't make a new one and make 20 new ones and pre-order a bunch and then try to scalp them. Try to cut down on that a little bit, because what they don't want scalpers to make money on this. They want people to have this hardware so that they can buy games. And then lastly, you do have, this difference between memory levels. And this is the big thing that is my big question, is can I open this up and change out the memory? Can I open it up and change out the hard drive? So the base model just comes with NAND flash memory, like what you have already on your Nintendo Switch or you have in the Wii U, which is fine. It's fairly fast, but, NVMe is faster. So you have to pay an extra $129 to get a 256 gigabyte hard drive. Is that an M.2 hard drive? Could I open it up and take that out and put in a better one? Could I buy the 64 gig version, take out, or I probably can't, that's probably soldered in the motherboard, but is there an M.2 slot in there? Could I just pop in a better M.2 drive? Could I put in a 1 terabyte drive because I want a lot of space? Now, this does come with a micro SD card slot, so you could always put in a high-speed 500 gigabyte micro SD card and have tons of storage. It just won't be as fast. So you don't really have to pay the extra $250 to get the 512 gigabyte model. which is going to have a really fast hard drive of an okay size. I think for $250, I could get an M.2 drive at a bigger size or maybe better performance for less money, right? So it doesn't look like you could just pop it open and put an M.2 drive in there. You may have to unscrew it and do some work. But to me, that'd be worth it. Wouldn't be a big deal. Screw off the back, put in a giant hard drive, and go with it. Otherwise, most of the games are probably going to run okay on a micro SD card. You can get a 512 gigabyte one for not very much money, or even 1 terabyte if you want, and it'll probably run pretty well. So this is kind of a weird thing that it's this much, so much more expensive. And then you have some value adds which are basically worthless, like exclusive Steam community profile bundle. Okay, that doesn't cost them really anything. Maybe that's some games. I don't know what that is. Exclusive virtual keyboard theme. Who cares about that? And then anti-glare etched glass. I guess you could always just put a screen protector on, which you probably should anyway. So anyway, I'd be tempted maybe to get the biggest one just because it's more convenient, and I'm not sure if I can change it out. But if I knew that I could put a different M.2 drive in it'd definitely be tempted to buy the base model and put in a better hard drive, like you're dealing with a real PC, rather than having to pay for this extra premium storage like what they do with phones. I'm not crazy about that, but that might be necessary in order to just kind of keep up with kind of tame the costs. Is like if you're a premium user, maybe you can get a little bit more money out of them and reduce that loss that you're incurring by having such aggressive pricing that goes all the way down to $400 for what I expect to be a pretty substantial machine. We'll very quickly, I think, take a look at the hardware. So the hardware, let's see here. We'll just take a look at this tech specs. So you do have a 7-inch touchscreen. You have mics for it. There's a headphone jack. We already talked about the USB-C options. There's clickable sticks. I think the ABXY, they look pretty big, like you're dealing with a full-size 360 controller. Maybe a little bit smaller than that, but definitely bigger than like the little buttons on the Vita. I don't mind the little buttons on the Vita so much. For whatever reason, the ones on the Nintendo Switch feel smaller. You have some trackpads you can use. So if you need to use a mouse in something, you could use that, a D-pad. We won't know exactly how these feel till this comes out and people can really test it. And then you have some buttons on the back. So they have a supposedly custom designed AMD APU, a Zen 2 running at 2.4 to 3.5 gigahertz. Now, I don't know, maybe it's variable speed depending on what you're doing. Like if you have a more intensive load, it'll automatically speed up. And then it does have like a custom GPU in it with like 1.6 teraflops. All this stuff, most consumers aren't going to think about this. These are kind of specs for like people who are PC nerds about this. But like most console people are like, does it play good games? They don't even care about the specs. They just know, oh, it's good. It has good resolution and it plays good games, right? I'd be kind of interested to know how that variable clock speed works. And then of course the storage that we talked about. All models include a high-speed micro SD card slot. And whether this is like upgradable, and the RAM upgradable. It comes with only 16 gigabytes of RAM, which is substantial for a handheld, but at this point, like, I don't even know how old my gaming PC is, like 6-7 years old. It has like 64 gigs in it. So that's going to be substantially less than what I end up using on my PC, but that's okay because it's a smaller, slimmer thing. I'm only going to be running one program at a time on it, most likely, instead of doing all the crazy crap that I do on mine. So you can take a look at all of this stuff as much as you want, like the haptic feedback or whatever it was, the 400 nits brightness, all the stuff that you want to look. It's basically a 720p screen, which is the same that's on the Switch. You could say that that's good or bad, but I think for most gaming applications, by limiting the display resolution to 720p, you're going to limit how taxing any of the games are on the hardware. If you only have to run them at 720p, then you can run games with lots of other things enabled. They're going to look a lot better with 720p than trying to run it at 1080p and having it be really laggy or having to put much more expensive hardware in it. So right away, that 720p kind of compromise. I think that is actually going to be a good thing for what they're trying to go for. When you're looking at a small screen, like the Vita runs at 540p, and it actually, you guys, I've streamed at 540p. It really doesn't look bad. So 720 on the Switch doesn't look bad either. What tends to look bad are frame rate drops or bad anti-aliasing and jagged things like that. So the 720p I think could look really good. I know it says by 800, but you'll be running stuff in mostly in 720p, I would expect. So anyway, there's that. And I don't know, I'm pretty interested in this piece of hardware. I don't know if I'm going to pre-order it or not, but you guys can decide on that. As a guy who runs a lot of PC games and kind of a PC, I'm not going to call myself a PC gaming nerd or something at this point, because I really do enjoy my handhelds and my consoles. But as a person who likes PC gaming and has a lot of PC games, I'm much more interested in this than, say, a lot of other things that are coming down the pipe, including in a lot of ways the PlayStation 5. I personally, the only reason I could think of for me to want to own a PlayStation 5 is to play Final Fantasy 16 on it whenever that comes out, because that's going to be a timed exclusive. But even then, you could just wait and play it later on a different platform. So anyway, guys, let me know what you think, and I will see you guys next time.